The Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood was founded in 1848 by three British artists, the 19-year-old John Everett Millais, the 21-year-old William Holman Hunt, and the 20-year-old Dante Gabriel Rossetti. They were meeting to discuss their disappointment about the decline in English art. The main reason for this decline was the training at the Royal Academy schools where all three had studied, and here you can see some examples of the works by Millais from before the start of the Brotherhood. They taught that the academic art education was way too restrictive and did not encourage the painter's creativity. Instead, they wanted to create fresh things, painted with passion, and they were particularly inspired by art from 15th century Italy. It was a period when many innovations in paintings were made, as before art did not have to be pretty and realistic. But then the Italian early Renaissance artists started to experiment with proper linear perspective, realism, naturalism, and new themes. And within a century, the High Renaissance had begun, the culmination of all these innovations, a couple of decades when artists like Raphael were active and when all these developments were perfected to the level that it was hard to further improve on it. And the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood wanted to go back to this 15th century spirit from before the period that Raphael was painting to reignite that freshness and innovative spirit in their own works and not just copy what all the other artists were doing. So Millais, Hunt and Rossetti met to discuss these issues and they called themselves the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood. Just to give you the idea, just before the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood meeting, John Everett Millais painted this work entitled Simon and Iphigenia, the work that nicely fit within the academic tradition in which they were educated. A few months later, inspired by his two friends, he painted this work entitled Isabella. What a big difference in the clarity of the composition and the colors. This was the beginning of that new freshness they were thinking about. Perhaps unlike some other art movements, the ideas of the Pre-Raphaelites cannot be summarized in a couple of sentences. Not only because of the variety in the way the different members implemented their ideas, but also because their ideas and themes changed quite a bit over time. So in this video, I focus on the first 4 to 5 years of the Brotherhood, and the next video will look at the evolution of their ideas after that. One of the central ideas of the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood was that they wanted to provide pictorial honesty, rather than an academic concoction of how reality should look like. Most of all, this meant that they wanted to capture nature truthfully. For this idea, they were inspired by the influential writer and art critic John Ruskin. In 1843, in the first volume of his book Modern Painters, he advised young artists that they should go to nature in all singleness of heart, and walk with her laboriously and trustingly, rejecting nothing, selecting nothing, and scorning nothing. One motivation underlying this recommendation was that the Victorian society was very religious, and capturing the true beauty of nature would be a testament to God's creation of the world. So, how to capture nature as it was? Traditionally, some artists try to capture nature truthfully by making sketches outdoors. But what if you would set up the actual canvas in the middle of nature? The Brotherhood believed that that would lead to better results. It was not always easy, of course, to paint in between the insects, windy or rainy weather, or have people walking by looking at your canvas. But this was their first step. No longer painting nature in a studio, but right in front of the actual scene. The result was that their paintings looked much brighter than those of their colleagues. As you can see in some of these paintings, the result was actually quite shocking to many viewers. The luminous colors seemed unnatural, even though they were directly inspired by the nature they observed. People were not used to the concept that art is painted like that, as the academies would actually teach artists to use more muted and blended colors, as that would lead to more harmonious and consistent results. The Brotherhood wanted to get acceptance for their new ideas by exhibiting their works at the main exhibition organized by the Royal Academy. What happened was that viewers could now see a pre-Raphaelite work next to a traditional academic work, and the level of detail and the brightness of the colors was so different between those works that the Brotherhood's work stood out. Of course, the works of the Brotherhood were not praised immediately, but critics definitely noticed this new style. So the first step of the Pre-Raphaelites was to put their canvas outside to paint nature. John Everett Millais and William Holman Hunt would also first paint the landscape portions of a painting, leaving some bare patches in their canvas where they could later add the figures, something they did during the winter in their studio. This was the opposite order of creating a painting than conventional, making the natural aspects of the painting thus more important. In 1851, the Brotherhood slowly started to get some more recognition, not only because the man who inspired them into nature, John Ruskin, finally also publicly supported their art, but also because they kept innovating. A close associate of the Brotherhood, Ford Madox Brown, made the next step in his painting the Pretty Bar lamps. Not only did he paint nature outside, he also made his models pose outside in 18th century costumes. And he did that in the bright sunlight, resulting in very intense colors, and according to many at that time, a bit too intense. It shows his family feeding the lambs, no deeper meaning to it than that. Just a pretty family scene outside, something that the Impressionists would also do some 2 decades later. Not only did the Pre-Raphaelites focus on nature, another primary interest of them was literature, and they really tried to combine literary and pictorial elements in a painting. They found inspiration for their topics from medieval literature, Shakespeare, Dante, and 19th century writers and poets. Especially Dante Gabriel Rossetti was inspired by poetry and literature. A few months after their first meeting, the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood had expanded with 4 members: the sculptor Thomas Woolner, the writer and brother of Dante Gabriel, William Michael Rossetti, the art critic Frederick George Stevens, and the painter James Collinson. So the total number of members of the Brotherhood was now 7, and they would keep it at that going forward. However, over time, they attracted the support of various associates. For example, 2 painters who were not official members but closely supported the ideas of the Brotherhood were Ford Madox Brown and Walter Howell Deverell. But not only Dante Gabriel Rossetti, who was a painter and a poet, was interested in poetry and literature. The others also liked to get inspiration from these sources. When exhibiting their works, their paintings were often accompanied by pieces of literature or poetry to provide extra context to their work. And sometimes the explanations were just integrated in the artwork, like in some works by William Holman Hunt, like this work inspired by Shakespeare, entitled Valentine Rescuing Sylvia from Proteus. To finish this first video about the Pre-Raphaelites, let's look at one of the most famous early Pre-Raphaelite paintings, combining both the search to represent nature truthfully and their interest in literature. In 1851, Millais painted this work entitled Ophelia, referring to a character from Shakespeare's dramatic play Hamlet. It's one of the most famous Pre-Raphaelite paintings, and it nicely illustrates how Millais worked at that time. He first set up his easel outside to capture all the natural elements in this painting, with great vividness and intense colors. He paid great attention to each individual flower, a tribute to God's wonderful creation of earth and nature. It took him 5 months of painting, 6 days a week for up to 11 hours, all outside to capture nature. Only after all the nature was finished, he would work on the figure of Ophelia. To make this as realistic as possible, he had his 19-year-old model Elizabeth Siddal posing for Ophelia. He made her lie in a bathtub for weeks, all dressed. Perhaps not surprisingly, she got a severe cold from doing this, but the result is impressive. So this is an introduction to the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood, and while they may have intended to be very fresh and innovative, a lot of viewers and critics would consider their ideas and works somewhat old-fashioned. Not strange if you get suddenly inspired by works from the 15th century. But their themes would soon change, and that next phase of the Brotherhood is the subject of next week's video. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that thumbs up button, subscribe and hit the notification bell. And as always, please leave your thoughts in the comment section down below. I always love reading them. Thanks for watching.